And that's what caused the Zimbabweans to act the way they did. They withdrew, reneged on that undertaking, and so the Zimbabweans then felt they had no choice but to take the particular route that they did. But the point I'm making, though, about all of this is that I think the example of Zimbabwe no, that's right. The example of Zimbabwe on the land thing actually says it's not necessarily true that big farms, big commercial farms, are more productive than smaller farms. And therefore, that if you redistributed land to benefit peasants, as has happened in Zimbabwe, that destroys agriculture, agricultural production. Maureen is very much better educated than I am. Has just given me, is it Mukoni? The title of the book is Zimbabwe's Land Reform, Myths and Realities. And it's written by Ian Schoons, together with two Zimbabwean, Nelson Marangwe and Blasio Mabenzange. But we can do this later. So I was answering the question posed by Ngengelezi that how do we handle the land question, land redistribution, without having this negative impact on agricultural production. I'm not necessarily saying we should do what the Zimbabweans did, but I'm saying the argument that redistribution of land in favor of the peasants is necessarily destructive of agriculture is not correct. Alex, have you written a book? No. I think
we're waiting for you.
I think of all the people sitting here, Alec is the only one who has written a book, like me. Now, I think that in order to write a book, first of all, you need time to be able to sit down and write or type or whatever. But when Maureen says, please come here to UNISA and talk to this new intake at TMALI, where do I get time to write? So this is a problem. No, but I think sure, everybody, Villiers de Haze in particular, sitting there, is one who reminds me every week about the need to write. You've seen the latest book that he has done, The End Game. It didn't show me the manuscript. And he said to me that the reason I'm not going to show you this thing is because I don't want you to make any corrections or changes and say, no, Ville, you are wrong here, you are right there. I'm going to write it, and you are going to differ with some of the things I say. And therefore, you'll have to write a book to counter what I say. Now, when it's done, the book, I'll invite you to come from AK. Thanks.
Thank you, Patron. Yeah, we could sit here the entire day, but we need to also get on with other business. I'll give an opportunity for only 2 other questions because, yeah, we do have other business to take care of this afternoon.
My name is Nokutula. I'm from Newcastle, KZN, but I'm based in Johannesburg. Okay. My question is regarding the pharmaceutical plant that is to be built in South Africa. As a professional pharmacist, so I'd like to know how do we benefit, or what's the take of the former president on that one, as a young South African black female? What's your take on that?
Okay, pharmaceuticals and how can young black Africans participate? Thanks. Yes. Your name?
Thank you. My name is President
Please.
My question is more on an individual basis to the Africans. What could be that new common vision or new thinking that Africans should be aspiring towards? I'm asking this question when I make reference, for example, to the 1965 summit that was organized by Nkrumah, trying to get all the heads of state to unite African leaders. And according to Julius Nyerera's opinion, it was that they were quite happy that they couldn't even get to the mechanisms of how that could be done, because they were actually very comfortable enjoying the pacts that come with the colonial borders that gives them the power to head those states. And taking that into account, and also looking at the recent reports about the fact that 70% of the officials in the municipalities do not have the skills and the competency to do what they are appointed, but are happy to hold the positions, but they are said to not have the skills and the competency to hold the office. And we also look at the recent reports about the RDP houses and the shoddy work that has been done, but people were happy to take the contracts and said that they are able to perform. So the question is, what is that new common vision and the change in the thinking that Africans need to adopt before we even start to try and engage on the issues that are challenging the whole continent? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Akona. My question is basically on the character of the Cadre that needs to be built for Africa's agenda. Most often, this character concentrates on leaders, on people that are already leaders. But I say that perhaps if a citizen of Africa, irrespective of where we are, as civil servants, as in private sector, we need to have this character of this Cadre. Now, the program is offered, most of these programs are offered more often in people that are already leaders and that are perhaps having other ideologies other than that of driving into the common vision of Africa's agenda. At what best stage or age can we actually start this so that everyone, as a citizen of Africa or interested in addressing issues of Africa, is equipped with this? Thank you.
My name is Sipo Sikhe. And to the patron, I would like to ask the question about the despondency which is perpetuated by the colonial forces having power over our belief systems and our ways of lives, and how they have made us to live the way they do in order to support the industrial civilization, which is current 21st century life. How do we as an African people, who have languages that were developed 10,000 BC, and languages like English making us feel inferior, which was derived from Latin, we need to identify in order to see Africans as a people, and they have created a system that makes us fight ourselves. Steve Biko said that you can stop colonization, but South Africa at the moment is living off the prophecy of Steve Biko, because the colonization of the mind is currently effective in Africa and South Africa. How do we fight our identity without killing ourselves?
There's a question about a pharmaceutical plant I don't know anything about it. Who's building a pharmaceutical plant?
It's a joint venture between the South African government. I think it's going to be referred to as Kitlapila. It's still at its infancy stages. So I thought maybe the former president will know, because it's a joint between South African government and
Okay.
the Swiss government.
Well, you know that we had a big battle with the pharmaceutical companies in the past. About pricing of drugs and medicines. The policy of the pharmaceutical companies is that they will charge prices for drugs and medicines according to what the market will carry. So you might find, therefore, that there's a tablet that is you buy in South Africa for 10 rand, and you can buy in Malawi for 1 rand. And their argument is that the South Africans can afford it, can afford to pay 10 rand. At least there is a big enough market in South Africa to afford that 10 rand. So we said, okay. Therefore, for the public health system, we will import the drugs from Malawi, the same drug. And so they said, no, you can't do that, because you would be violating intellectual property rights. As this company, we own this drug, intellectual property, and therefore we are the only ones who can determine what price to charge where in the world. So we said, okay, we understand what you're saying, but we are a government, and we've got very poor people who can't afford these high prices. So we're going to buy these medicines where they are cheapest. So it was a big battle, and they threatened to take us to the World Trade Organization, and of course we were violating international intellectual property rights, etc. There was a big petition signed by members of the US Congress, many of them, threatening us with sanctions. If you don't agree with the pharmaceutical companies, the US is going to impose sanctions on you. The US government itself intervened, same sort of threats, but we said no. We really have to attend to this matter, that we can't afford the prices of these drugs. So in the end, they relented, they gave in. And so we had a deal with them to say, okay, we'll do South Africa a special favor, but please don't shout about it. So indeed something happened. So Andre, I'm only saying this, that obviously if it's possible to develop our capacity in the country to build a pharmaceutical industry, it's obviously very good, provided then we don't fall into this trap of saying pricing of these drugs produced here would be according to what the price is or what the market can carry, which means depending on how much the richest among us, the upper echelon within our society economically, can afford. If indeed to build a pharmaceutical industry in this country results in reducing prices for drugs and medicines, that obviously would be very good. But that would remain to be seen whether a private investor in the pharmaceutical industry would agree to that. That you produce the same drug, you put it in the same box, it's got the same label and color and everything, and they sell it cheaper here because it's produced here, and not sell it cheaper somewhere else. Because it would mean, for them, the collapse of the market, if people can access the drugs produced in South Africa, the collapse of the market in other countries if prices are higher. Well, I'm saying in principle, surely it should be a good thing. But we have to, I'm sure we'd have to watch those matters about pricing. The questions raised by Pilis and Akona are related. The fact of the matter is that over the years, the continent has in fact developed a vision for itself. Both the OAU and the African Union have taken very many and very important and very correct decisions about where the continent should go. Decisions about the politics of the continent, about the economy of the continent, about the emancipation of women, about the rights of children, issues of culture, and all that. There is a vision. And hopefully, all of us, as we're doing this work here as part of TMALI, will have a chance to look at that. Because to exercise its leadership on the continent that we're talking about, my view is that in very good measure, we don't have to be inventing new policies. Because fortunately, there are these agreed policies. And of course, you would know what the difficulty is. You are now dealing with 54 independent African countries, the difficulty of getting a consensus among them on anything. In the fact that you've got this whole body of policy, and therefore there is in fact a common vision on the continent, I think is very, very important. And therefore I'm saying that our intervention, surely, even if later we've got to say these policies were inadequate, but there are policies that are there now, already agreed, which we don't have to renegotiate, that we need to ensure are implemented. Because this is part of the problem, that despite the existence of those policies, you don't see the kind of change on the continent visualized in those policies. And I was saying earlier, the reason you don't see that kind of change, it's not because of the absence of policy, but it's because of the absence of people to implement the policies, which is yourselves. And therefore, the matter, obviously, of competence, as I was saying earlier, we need these people with a proper understanding of the challenges that face us on the continent, responses to those challenges, and whatever other professional skill that you need in order to be able to respond to those challenges. And certainly, understanding of the policies on which the continent is agreed, which is an important part of this. And indeed, we are quite right, about this is a point that is made by Piliswa about the development of the necessary competence and skills. It's true, you need those. And indeed, I think when we talk about this agent of change, this cadre for change, for development on the continent, we must talk about a person who's got that understanding and that commitment and the necessary skills. And none of those things come naturally. And so, the intervention needs to be made with regard to that knowledge, with regard to that inspiration, and as I was saying, with that kind of skill. Somebody must intervene to prepare this cadre. At what stage do you do this? I think it would be good if we could start from day one when the baby is one day old. It's a lifelong task. It's the question that is raised by Spositli. I don't know what they teach in our schools. one day I had to host a group of young people, very young. They were between 8 and 12, something like that, golfers, playing golf, and they were going to a tournament in the United States. So they came to, and we were in Pretoria, here, at the government guest house. And this little girl, African, was about 9 years old. There's a small golf course there in that housing estate, 9 holes. And so they were playing there, and so we walked to this government guest house. And she says to me, oh, but President, this house is gigantic. Little girl like this. So I was very surprised. Where does she know this word from? But you could see where she comes from a particular kind of school that would teach her words like gigantic. But I'm quite sure, if you said to that child, who was King Shaka? And when did he rule? She wouldn't know. She wouldn't. But maybe if you said, what about King George, she would know. I'll tell you a little story. Three of us, some years back, were trying to write a book, not about our history, but other things. And failed. It didn't work. But as we're doing this, I read a history book. It's called Frontiers, by a historian called Mostert. And he talks about a Portuguese admiral in the 16th century who went east to India and all those places and conquered huge portions of land and so on, and was gone for a number of years. And he belonged to the Portuguese aristocracy. And so among the people that he traveled with were the sons of the Portuguese aristocrats. So after all of this very successful trip to the east, the King of Portugal then recalled him that he must come back to Portugal to receive the highest awards in the country. The whole country is very excited that this great conqueror must now come home. So they came back and passed through the Cape. And as usual, they then stopped near Cape Town there to interact with the Khoi people who were there to get meat and cattle and water and all of that on the way back to Portugal. And indeed, by this time, this is in the 16th century, the Khoi population was used to this. So indeed, they came and they bargained and they met, and the Khoi gave them sold them what they wanted. And of course, it was a barter system. So this admiral decides that, I have conquered the East. And I don't really see why, when he's got the cattle and all that, I don't really see why I must pay these people. So he decides, he's not going to pay. So they start loading the things that they've got onto the ships. Of course, the Khoi get very angry. A battle started. And one of the things I learned there is that the Khoi would train cattle to fight and even help to sharpen the horns. And they used them as artillery I don't know who's a soldier here. The artillery is used, you have the infantry, which are your foot soldiers, and normally, many battles like that, the artillery pieces are behind there, and they lob shells over the heads of the artillery to hit the enemy there. And then the infantry advances. And they were using cattle as artillery. So what happened in this particular battle, this battle started. So the Khoi called their war cattle, would then charge the Portuguese. And they kill many of them, and then the foot soldiers come with spears. The admiral died there near Cape Town. He never reached Portugal. And if you go into the Portuguese archives to this day, they say this was the biggest loss of people in any battle that Portugal has ever fought. It was because there were so many of the people who were members of the Portuguese aristocracy. This was the cream of Portuguese society. Now, I'm saying you don't know the story. That's part of the problem that we've got to correct. It is, we've got to get to know ourselves. Who are we? Where do we come from? What's our history? Even about our continent. You see what's happening in Mali, in Timbuktu, with these people there who are busy destroying a very important African heritage. And I'm trying to hear and listen, but what is the continent saying? And all you hear is one statement from the African Union Commission. The rest of the continent is quiet. This is our heritage as Africans is being destroyed by other Africans who are misled. So I agree that one of the things that we've got to do in order to develop this Cadre that we're talking about is to recover our own sense of identity about ourselves, which gives you that sense of confidence that indeed we can solve our problems ourselves. We don't need consultants and advisors coming from America or England or someplace like that. We can do these things ourselves. And I'm quite sure that it's particularly important for us. The last story, Maureen, why? I will tell before I sit down, so that people can go and have lunch. Some years ago, I said to President Bouteflika of Algeria, I think we must commission some of our intellectuals to write, make a comparative assessment of the impact of colonization on our people in South Africa and the Algerians. I said to him, I'm saying this because we had the largest number of settlers in South Africa, and you had in Algeria the second largest number of settlers. And let's see what impact is made. So he says to me, well, you are somewhat late, because we did that while you people were engaged in struggle, because we wanted to understand more. The Algerians were very strong supporters of our struggle, but he said we wanted to understand more about South African reality and all that. So they got a couple of journalists from France who came here just as French people, and he says, what happened in South Africa? What the system of that settler colonialism became so entrenched, and it needed to entrench itself so much that it resulted in the destruction of any sense of African identity. he says, well, you are fortunate, talking about me. He says, you are fortunate because you are Thabo. But the other people in South Africa are James, John, and Richard, Maureen. Indeed. And he said, you see, that was part of this process. So, if your names must change, your religion must be destroyed. Your sense of beliefs, you must be remade into the image of this colonizer. He says that did not happen in Algeria. And he says the reason it didn't in Algeria was because of Islam. He says it was the religion which served as a protective shield for the Algerian people, so that they managed to keep their belief systems, they managed to keep their names, and then all of that. He says it was a religion. And in your case, you didn't have that protective wall. And indeed, therefore, produced the kind of person that supposedly was talking about. It's something that we surely have to correct. And indeed, I think as we are studying here at UNISA for whatever period, I think it gives us this possibility to answer this question. What is it that we should do in order to regain that identity? And therefore, I'm saying to generate that level of confidence, which makes us know that we can indeed solve our problems. Doesn't matter how difficult they look, we can. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, TMALIs, I believe we have now been TMALIzed. This is a term we learned from the class of first semester 2012. They said once you come through TMALI, you can't be the same because you've been TMALIzed. So I hope you've indeed now been properly TMALIzed. Thank you so much, Patron. Let's give him another round of applause.